Recording has started.
All right, our next presenter is Abby Battis, and she will be giving a presentation called Online Exhibits Equals Greater Archives Accessibility. So I'll hand it over to Abby.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Before I start off, I just want to make sure, can everybody see my screen? Good to go.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I'm Abby Battis. I'm the Associate Director for Collections at Historic Beverly. My role at Historic Beverly is basically I oversee the entire collection, which is bursting at 1,000,000 pieces. It's one of the largest collections that I've worked with. The collection consists of archives and archival materials, which is about 50% of the 1,000,000, and then objects of daily life, so textiles and whatnot, furniture, you name it, we probably have it in the collection. And so you're probably asking, where is Historic Beverly? I'm an hour ahead of all of you. I'm over on the East Coast. I'm just about 20 miles north of Boston in Beverly, Massachusetts. I'm directly next to Salem, which normally at this time is a disaster at Halloween, but thankfully it's all is quiet right now. But it's very interesting because we are a historical society. And so today I'd like to show you really a behind the scenes look at the creation of an online exhibit that we did. It's called Set at Liberty. And through this exploration that I'll take you on, I want to show you the reasons why we at Historic Beverly really started to work to increase accessibility with direct focus on our collection. And it really comes to a head with our online exhibit, our first, that was launched at the beginning of 2020. I should mention before I get into the presentation that the online exhibit team included staff, so myself, as well as a contract historian, so a historian that wasn't on staff. She was contracted, as well as a contracted designer, our staff archivist, and then 2 archival interns from Simmons College. Oops, not letting me advance. There we go. So why an online exhibit? For us, it is our mission that is behind our vision of accessibility for all. In 1891, the Beverly Historical Society was founded by a group of local residents who cared about the city's history and started collecting those stories. Today, the collection, like I said, boasts nearly 1,000,000 pieces, including 3 historic properties, which you see here. We have the 1781 John Cabot House, which is that down in the bottom. And that is our headquarters and has been since 1892. The Cabot House is a regional visitor center. It includes our exhibits, it's our program space, and it houses our research services. In 1932, the Society acquired the 17th century Balch House, which you see up at the top, the brown house, and that was from a group of Balch family members and preservationists. John Balch was one of the first settlers of Beverly, and Balch descendants from all over the world remain important contributors to the organization as well as the house, and that's something that you should keep in mind as we start talking about collections accessibility. And then in 1937, we acquired Hale Farm from Hale descendants, including the 1694 structure that was built for John Hale, Beverly's first minister. The property reflects not only the 17th century witchcraft hysteria, which Reverend Hale was deeply involved in. He was one of the trial ministers during the witch trials. So when I mention Salem and Halloween, we are not seeing the tourism that we normally would see at this time of year to this property. It's unfortunate, but we want to stay healthy. This house is long associated with one family, and it illustrates the evolution of the community in that area. And again, it's important to remember that there's an awful lot of documentation on the family, on the witch trials, etc., in our collection. So our archive is booming and needs to be accessible. In June of 2017, the Beverly Historical Society underwent a rebranding of the organization, and part of the rebranding efforts was not only changing our name from the Beverly Historical Society, but it was also reevaluating and updating the organizational mission and vision, which you see here on the screen. And I want to point your eyes in the direction of our very last mission statement, which is making history accessible for all, so that we can improve handicap accessibility and increase public access to our collection and our houses using 21st century methods such as our online collection and social media platforms. So why accessibility? We all know that accessibility in the field is really changing. Because we at Historic Beverly have 3 historic properties that date to the 17th and 18th century were not truly physically accessible. None of our properties have elevators. All of our restrooms at all 3 properties are located on the 2nd floor. Doorways are far from being wide enough, and physical issues continue. You name it, we've got it. At the start of the rebranding efforts, we knew that the accessibility to our programs and our exhibits was the #1 problem for us, but that isn't the only kind of accessibility issues that we have. A large stream of revenue for Historic Beverly is attached to research. Research in person at our headquarters, the John Cabot House, as well as our research that's done by phone and by email. People from around the world can call us and then pay for hours that we do research for them. And we were finding that that really a lot of people wanted to come in and do their own research. And unfortunately, because our headquarters, our research area, isn't accessible, that was becoming more and more difficult. Historic Beverly is also a bit different from other organizations when it comes to our constituency, because a significant portion of our membership is from out of state. It's very awkward. It's the only institution that I've worked for that has a drastically skewed membership that is out of state and not local. That really is because of the house that you see there on the left, that John Balch house. It draws many generations in support of the organization, and we simply were not offering them enough benefits for their membership. One of the perks of Historic Beverly membership is free access to the properties, free programs, and free research. Well, if they couldn't get to the properties and they couldn't come in and see the research, they weren't really gaining anything from being a member except for throwing money towards the house that they so deeply loved that was part of their family. This constituency just can't travel to visit the house. They couldn't come to visit the exhibits, and they can attend on-site programs, and they definitely can't perform in-person research. So the physical accessibility was a really, really big issue for us. So the question became, how could we really blow up our thought process on accessibility? How can we embrace technology and offer more bang for the buck to our members, visitors, as well as researchers? So while crafting our mission and vision, we were looking towards digital content, and that seemed to be the answer to achieving our goal of making sharing the 3 houses, the 5 centuries of history, and the thousands of stories, I mean really millions of stories that we have, more accessible to our existing constituency, as well as starting to draw in a new base. We wanted to go broader. So with that in mind, in 2017, which is when I started at Historic Beverly, and 2018, we did all that we could to make things digital. We rebuilt our website and tried to build up our resources available on the site. If you were to go underneath our collections, we have all of our finding aids in our archives, digital as PDF forms. We still, even though we've been closed for a while during COVID, we still have interns that are coming in, and they've got their own office space to work in, and they're still continuously working on finding aids and helping us digitize our archives. Through the Past Perfect database that we're using, we launched our online collection, which opened free and to the public worldwide in June of 2017. And that launch was 15,000 objects. It now has over 55,000 objects online, almost entirely archives. And so, of the million objects that we have in our collection, like I said, 50% of it is archival, and that seems to be our real big focus when trying to make our archives accessible to everybody. And so our first foray into really pulling off the Band-Aid and going digital was getting our online collection up there. The importance of having an online collection and its continued update is vital, not only to the accessibility of the collection, but it also helps us, or should I say, it forces us to continuously inventory the collection and continuously catalog it. So for pieces that have been sitting in our museum vault for years and years and years that have never made the light of day, it allows us to bring those pieces out, do thorough preservation research and see if, anything's going on, see if boxes are jammed. I mean, it allows us to hold the piece once and for all for the first time in maybe even decades to examine how it's doing and then digitize it and make it accessible to everybody around the world for free. As some of you, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that viewing objects online sometimes can be a much better method for viewing them because you've got the capability to zoom in and examine a document or a photograph more closely. So the original feedback that we were starting to receive about going digital with our online collection is people could actually see more of the transcriptions and the writing that was going on in the documentation, or seeing details in photographs that were being posted in the collection. And so we knew we were onto something. We've seen increased viewing of the online collection since its 2017 launch. It was an increase as of the beginning of this year of 304% of viewership onto our online collection. And basically, our research requests have also increased since then by 117%. So by putting the collection out there, it allows us to put it out and make people interested, pique their interest. With the online collection launch and procedures in place for sustaining that work, it was important for us now to focus on other areas of accessibility, and that was our programming. And so it was in the fall of 2018, thank goodness, that we started to use Zoom, and we started to make our programs hybrid. So our programming started to go online as well as in person, and so we were doing hybrid programming way before COVID. So as you can imagine, when COVID hit us on March 17th, we were able to pivot instantly. So that was fantastic. Now that the online collection and the hybrid digital programs were launched, we were missing out on one key element, the exhibits. We were doing in-house exhibits, I'd say 3 or 4 a year. And those exhibits we really couldn't get out of the exhibit spaces. And so remember, according to our mission, we were looking to tell thousands of stories. But how could we do that in a more focused storytelling way? And that's when we started to look at our strongest collection, and that's the archives. And so this is one of the spaces. You can see that it's jam-packed. We're at capacity. I'm very excited to tell you that 2021, we're going to break ground on blowing out our research library to expand, which is so exciting for us. But this is just a peek inside our museum collection vault, one of 2 that we have. And the collection is basically chock full of documents, books, diaries, photographs, ship logs, name it, we've got it. We started to explore, though, in the archives, the untold stories that we hadn't really uncovered or talked about. We were doing exhibits that were kind of what the people wanted, just so that we could get the people through the door. But we really had to start thinking about the constituency that couldn't get through our door, And so we decided that let's take a look at the richer content. What really, really deep history can we tackle? That kept leading us back to the story of these documents on the enslaved Beverly. In the past, Historic Beverly had produced one newsletter article of a mere 200 words on one enslaved woman by the name of Juno Larcom. And on the heels of that newsletter article, only one program was presented on Juno, but that was it. Come to find out, we actually had over 80 documents on dozens of Beverly's enslaved. And this was it. This was the story that we needed to tell. In the summer of 2018, as a sign that we were on the right path, we received a substantial gift of archival material. The gift contained dozens of more documents covering even more stories of the enslaved in Beverly. Seen here on the left is a silhouette from that collection of what we think is a 6 or 8-year-old boy named Brutus Julius Mozambique from Mozambique. Along with the collection came his indenture papers as well as his passport to travel from Mozambique to Beverly. And then on the right, you see baptismal records of Juno and Jethro Larcom from the First Parish Church collection. So the Larcom gift of the silhouette and thousands of documents that is attached to the boy on the left was just absolutely amazing, and it started to fit and connect stories for us with the original 80 pieces that we had on the enslaved in Beverly. Thankfully, the documentation didn't stop there. Fast forward a bit for a moment to the summer of 2019. We were knee-deep, or I should say waist-deep, in the design process of the exhibit when we received the entire archival collection from the First Parish Church in Beverly. The collection itself holds the original documentation of Reverend John Hale, who, as the first minister of Beverly, of the town, would have acted as the city clerk. So that halted us temporarily to dig through this archive to find more enslaved stories, which it did. In the donation, we found records of the enslaved attending the First Parish Church, and more baptismal records for other enslaved. So right here you see Juno and Jethro. They're highlighted. We've got Jethro here, Juno here, and then throughout Hale's book there were more Negroes. As you can see, it says Jethro, a Negro man, Juno, a Negro woman. There was more documentation that we uncovered, which led us down more rabbit holes to start actually building up this online exhibit. So as you can see, we have a pretty complete record of undocumented history within the city, and we were committed to tell the story, but we needed to figure out how. So it was a time to look for money, and there basically is where I started to look for sponsors and donors and grants. I was able to secure some funding from the donor of the large Larcom collection that came in that first summer, but he solely only wanted it used for his collection and anything that was related to his collection pieces being used in the exhibit. I also needed to find ways that I could pay the staff or the contractors to do the work on the exhibit. So I started with securing a Beverly Cultural Council grant of $1,200 that is funded by the Mass Cultural Council, which had us firmly on the path for the start of creating the exhibit. Which leads us to the content. Basically, we had the idea. The idea was born. We had seed money to get the project off the ground, which had us going right into 2019, meeting with the chosen historian, putting feelers out for the online exhibit designer, who thankfully ended up being our volunteer in-house designer, who was very familiar with the Adobe Spark platform that we had, we started researching what type of online exhibit would fit our brand and our voice, because you have to remember we just went through a rebranding, so what we were going to put out there needed to be on brand. And then we needed to decide on what the exhibit content software would be. And that's when we realized that we already pay for Adobe, and part of Adobe was Adobe Spark. So for free, we already had this platform that we could use to build the exhibit. Once all of the back end work was done, it was time to work with the creative team and get it started. So as you saw earlier, we received a lot of content on the Larkham family when those materials came into the collection in 2018. It's important to note that everything that you see for the visuals in the online exhibit are in the collection of Historic Beverly, except for one. And that fact demonstrates how important our collection is to this topic of the enslaved in Beverly. The materials used for the exhibit created complete stories with the need for little outside research to be performed, which is amazing. We had most of the answers in our archive. Documents such as the baptismal records that I showed you earlier, as well as Bibles, hymnals, wills, bills of sale of the slaves, census records, and then passports. We also had indentured papers. They were all used from our archive collection. We could even document the breakup of specific families, including the sale of 3 of the 12 children of Juno and Jethro. So it really started to expand, and this exhibit became a lot bigger than we envisioned. With this exhibit, we were able to share 32 archival objects from our collection. We were able to tell 9 stories of the enslaved in Beverly, including Chester, the runaway, Reuben, who was sold for the second time at the age of 12, and then 3 soldiers that were fighting for freedom for their country when they themselves were yet free men. We did face some hurdles. Something that I could talk about for hours is the fact that the vetting process of an exhibit on slavery should have been really a main focus of exhibit design. But I don't want to lose track of the importance of exhibits, online exhibits, and accessibility. But I do have to recommend, if you want to learn from me, reach out and I'll tell you what not to do when building an enslaved exhibition. Because I do have to say the whole entire exhibit team was white. So, error number 1. But another hurdle that we had was capacity. Having never done an online exhibit before, I kind of forgot that I still had my regular job tasks to do. So I was building out other exhibits. I was doing true collections management, as well as the fact that I'm an administrator. So I was wearing the multiple hats, but also added on something that none of us could figure out at the beginning how much time this would have taken. And so that leads me into funding. The $1,200 seed money, the $1,000 that we got from the donor, and a couple of the sponsorships that we received definitely did not cover the cost of building out the exhibit. So don't undervalue yourself and don't undervalue the task at hand. I really should have gone into this with a true idea of building out an online exhibit. And then what next? When you set a very high bar, your constituency expects the same or better. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. We set a very high bar with an exhibit on slavery. And so the next online exhibit, they're expecting something even more scholarly or on par with that. We do have another online exhibit launching, but it's about our photography collection. And so I fear that some of our constituency might be disappointed. But the results outweigh the hurdles. The results of an online exhibit's increase in greater accessibility allows you to provide unlimited access worldwide, which cuts down on physical barriers of accessibility. And we launched Set at Liberty in January of this year with no barrier set up. It's free, it's open to the public. Anybody can view it from around the world. And that is a key point to keep in mind because, boy, have we built up a broad audience. We've heard from people around the world, museums from around the world who want access to our collection. We've been told that our enslaved collection rivals that of the Massachusetts African American Museum. Who knew? And that's because we have exposed it to the public. The other reason, which I think you all agree, that makes online exhibits and digitizing your collection so perfect is that it limits the handling of archival materials. You touch it once and you're done. And that was huge for us. It forced us to inventory, it forced us to catalog, but we knew that once we touched it and got all these high-res images, one and done. The other thing that has happened, which is absolutely phenomenal, we got these stories out there about these Beverly families. It has increased our archival collections. We have received more and more donations. And at this point, we're thinking of doing a Set at Liberty #2 because we've got even more documents. I think we have tripled our documentation on Enslaved in Beverly as of now. And remember, we started with 80 documents. So it's pretty exciting. The other thing, too, to keep in mind is that it generates interest in the collection for increased public programming and school tours, not just locally, but nationally. You know, we were so excited when we could get all of the public schools in the area through our door to cater to, local history or the story of the Revolutionary War. But now we're getting online school tour bookings from all over. We actually have one that's an online booking for Set at Liberty from Los Angeles. We never would have been able to do that. This also increases our website foot traffic, which leads to increased program attendance, membership and shop sales, and research inquiries. It allows us to drive people to our website because that's where the link for the exhibit is, and it allows us to show them what we've got. And the most important is that it generates interest in the collection, it increases research, and it generates revenue. We've seen an increase in research based on what people are finding in that collection. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If any of you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'll take questions now. I think we might have a minute or two.
That presentation was wonderful. I'm thinking about your comment about reducing wear and tear on the objects with digitize once and then use it for multiple online exhibits when your buildings that your collections are housed in are archival objects more or less themselves. It probably reduces wear and tear on those as well to not have people coming through them all of the time.
Exactly. And now it's interesting because once we received the city collection, the one from the First Parish Church, once word got out that we received that collection, the people who wanted to come in and research specifically the handling of that one book, we really wanted to cut down on, something that dates to 1689. And so it's forced us to focus on what we're going to digitize and get it up there. So it's how many times can you use a digitized object? And so not only can you put it in your online database, but you can use it in exhibits too. So double duty trying to scan all of your archive.
Very cool. We do have a question from one of the participants here. Could you talk about what your online school tours are like?
Yes, so what we've done is we really have focused on, we started off when we were doing hybrid, we started off doing these what are called spotlight tours, and they're available for you if you wanted to take a peek. They're over on our YouTube channel. And what we did from that is we started to build out spotlight tours. And so we custom create these tours for schools. So if they're specifically asking for a topic, we build it out based on what we have digitized and whatnot. And so the school will book, for example, the story of the revolution um, online program. And what we'll do is we'll go through Zoom and visit the classroom and do a full presentation on an exhibit or on a collection or even on just one object. And again, that speaks to the fact that we've digitized those objects, so it allows us to keep pulling and pulling and adding more and more into our school programs.
All right. Do you have any other questions for Abby?
I have one, but I can just ask it. I'm not going to type it in.
Yeah, go for it.
So I work at a small archive, and it's only myself and another archivist, so there's two of us. And I've always wanted to do an online exhibit, have never attempted it. So I'm just curious, how big is your team that worked on this exhibit, and how long did it take you to create it? Several weeks, a couple months?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's from basically the very beginning with the idea, securing the money, securing the team. And my team wasn't big. It was myself, the contract exhibit designer, the contract historian, and then my archivist and 2 interns. And the way that I use the archivist and the 2 interns is the interns were just churning out as much digital content that they can. So we'd plop boxes down in front of them that they already had their finding aid and everything, and they were pulling out everything that we needed to actually add into this group. Because something that I didn't talk to you about is that we also committed ourselves. If we were putting out an online exhibit, we also wanted to build an educational resource package. And so the educational resource package has additional content that's from our collection. So we've scanned stuff and printed out handouts and whatnot. So, but it did take a full 2 years to do it. The build itself, the exhibit designer, myself, and the historian, took about 6 months to build it.
Well, it sounds like all of the effort was absolutely worth it and paid off. 2 years is I'm kind of on the beginning end of a project like that myself. We have a physical exhibit in our corporate headquarters, and we're trying to make a virtual version of it.
Yeah.
And we have the content, and some of it's already been digitized. We've got objects in addition to scanned things, so it's a project and a half. So that's for sure.
I could definitely tell you, if you want to start thinking about an online exhibit, don't choose slavery. So, because we built it and then we sent it out to a vetting team of about 24 people, and the first pass, the rough draft of it, the feedback was brutal, absolutely brutal. And we almost had to rewrite the whole entire thing. And so now I'm working on the photo exhibit, an online exhibit about our photography. It's the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. It doesn't have to go out to be vetted, it's just the content and you throw it up. And here's a tip. If you already have content that has been in past exhibits, exhibit labels, etc., you reuse that. Because we have about 15 actual exhibits that have been on view at our site that are ready to now go digital. Because we have all of the scans of the content and we have all of the labels written. And so we're just going to redo it. And we've committed to churning out 2 online exhibits a year now. So.
Great. We've got one last question, because I know we got another session that's going to be starting. Our last question: what software did you say you used to build your online exhibit? This person said their internet was cutting out. It was fully Adobe Spark, did you say?
Yes, it was fully Adobe Spark. At first, I thought that I wanted to use the Past Perfect exhibit formula because we pay for Past Perfect for our online collection, but I did not like the way that it limited our branding capability. And once we stumbled upon the fact that we already pay for Adobe, I looked at Spark and I realized that I could bring all the branding elements, the color palette and the font, all of it over into Spark, and that it worked out perfectly. And it's pretty easy to use.
Good to know. All right, let's see if we can squeeze in one last question. Even with a contract historian, the vetting was brutal. What were the criticisms? Looking at a historic topic with two modern glasses?
We didn't have anybody black that helped work on it. And so it was a very, and now I look back on it and I see that it was a very white voice. It was an incredibly white voice. And so I I completely would change the way that we did it from the start if I were to do it again. But it looking at it through a really different lens. And I think we probably, if we had published it right then without it being vetted, I think we probably would have been absolutely slaughtered. Because, I look at the additions and the changes that were made. And, I think we were looking at it through rosy glasses because, again, all three of us also are Beverly natives. And so, we're talking about deeply rooted Beverly history with families that we know. And so I think we might have been trying to tiptoe around the subject, but the historians, the vetting committee really made us, be honest. And I'm thankful that they did.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a very productive set of conversations. Definitely a good idea at it and bring in all of those different perspectives.
Yes.
Glad that it worked out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm definitely going to go look at the website.
Oh, thank
I
you.
have Adobe Spark also, so maybe I will look into using that.
Sure. And anybody who wants to reach out, don't hesitate. I love to talk about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stop the recording for this session.